Want to travel more but feel overwhelmed by flying, finding a week off, or leaving the country? Or maybe you already travel some, but you're feeling stuck in your routines. Are you at a place in life where it's hard to commit far in advance? Well, we have the solution. And today we go over exactly where to start if you're feeling overwhelmed or stuck in a rut.
Welcome to the Travel More podcast.
Each episode, we share custom itineraries, travel hacks, expert advice, and even stories of our past travel failures to help you level up your travel game.
I'm Shelly, a lover of plans, itineraries, and cheap flights. I'm an expert deal finder with one eye always on the budget.
And I'm Bruce, the improviser, ready to pick up where plans fail to turn letdowns into unexpected trip favorites. We're here to bust through barriers that stop you from making your travel dreams a reality.
So book that flight, buy the tickets, and say hello to your next adventure.
This is the Travel More podcast.
Welcome to the 7th episode of Travel More podcast.
Welcome back.
We are so excited. We have such a busy week, but before we get into anything, I just want to remind you that our giveaway is closing next week. To enter, all you have to do is see the show notes and join our newsletter, and then there's a second entry if you open the email. But it's for a year of Scotch cheap flights, or going, as it's now known.
Premium year. Premium subscription.
Yeah, so that's very exciting. So that's closing next week. So get those in before then so we can give away a nice year of really cheap flights.
Yeah, definitely check it out. I think it's so worth it. It's something that Shelly and we've talked about a lot and we use regularly. It's how we've gotten so many good deals, especially international travel.
Yeah. And it's kind of how we started being able to travel. It was like that and like our little Capital One eraser point travel hacking.
Yes.
It was like our intro travel hacking.
Speaking of, we're very excited because we have a trip coming up to London for spring break.
Yep, which we used a little bit of travel hacking on, and then, which we'll go into in more details later when we kind of do a recap of our travel hack for the year. And then we're also really excited because this summer, I feel like there should be like a drum roll.
I know, like...
but we have our first ever business class flight, which we again paid for completely with points and miles.
It's going to ruin us, I'm telling you.
Yeah, and we're literally going to be
lay flat
ruined.
seats.
Oh, I can't.
I
can't wait.
You get a pre-flight cocktail, I think.
Yeah, and it's Singapore Air. It's like... It's a nice fancy one. So anyways,
definitely, we will be back with updates for travel hacking in the future, and we've got some exciting things coming for that.
But actually, this is about none of those things. This episode is kind of taking us back to our roots in a way, because this is really where we started kind of traveling more, which not to use the name of the podcast a million times today, but this is kind of how we started traveling, and we realized the more and more we did these types of things, the bigger and bigger our trips kind of got, and I think it really came from this idea of local travel.
Yeah, and today we want to talk about, what is local travel and why do we love it? Why do we think it's important to talk about, and what we can share with all our listeners about some of our experiences. And what Shelly was talking about is, Shelly and I have been together about 10 years. When we started, and if you listen to our first episode, we kind of go over how we've been able to take a lot of trips throughout the year, even whether we were making like $10 an hour kind of wages, we didn't have as much flexibility to kind of our lifestyle now. And a lot of those trips we took in the first few years of our relationship were short trips, exploring our surroundings, the region around us. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that they're just so important, and I don't want to like give it away too early, but they're just so important. And I think that everyone should be doing these essentially as much as possible, these like little local trips. So before we get too far into this, let's talk about like what we define as this idea of local travel.
So when we talk about travel, I think people like to gatekeep the word to some degree.
Maybe a little bit.
It's a strong, maybe gatekeeping is a strong choice, but I think it's important to expand your view of what travel is.
Well, I think people like to say like, traveling is only if you're doing this, this, and this.
Like if you're backpacking or you're exploring internationally or something like that.
Yeah, and it's like very based on like, you have to be having these like super authentic, like grassroots type experiences. So like things like Disney World and cruises and things like that are not really travel, which I just think... I don't know what the point is.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what the idea behind like kind of putting a line in the sand and saying this is travel, this is not. And so because of that, we kind of have this very broad definition of travel, and especially with this idea of local travel.
So when we define local travel, we like to think of it's all about getting out of your typical routine and discovering new things. And honestly, travel in general for us, I think, is about experiences outside of your routine. And it doesn't matter how far you go. It doesn't necessarily matter what you're going to do. You could be going to relax. You could be going to explore, to adventure. It could be in nature. It could be with people. So for local travel, we're really thinking about the region around you. You know, it could be as much as even discovering something in a town nearby.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be this long thing that you planned out for 6 months in advance, and you have all these hotels booked and, you know, these flights, and, it can be a lot, especially if you're just now getting out, or you have a life situation change, like if you just had a baby or you are newly coupled and you don't know if you want to, kind of make this huge trek.
Right, or a big commitment to thinking ahead of time, like we talk about in our first episode, right? How do you set up your whole year for some of these bigger trips? You can still set up your year and think about, I really want to do something with my weekend.
Yes.
I really want to explore something, do something a little different than my normal routine.
Yeah, and we mentioned in the Travel Talk episode, that first one we keep kind of talking back about, that if you put the $200, you and your travel partner put $200 a month back, that you have two $800 kind of weekend trips and one $3,000 trip. And we've already mentioned how you could spend that $3,000 trip in a couple episodes ago now, with our Paris one. And we have a couple more coming up too that may give you some ideas with that bigger $3,000 trip. But for this $800 trip, it could easily look like a really nice 3-day weekend to a nearby town. It could look like going to a festival or fair somewhere nearby, or even a concert. A lot of people are traveling to those big concerts that are coming out.
Or a sporting event, something
plays.
Plays. With Charlie and I love going to see any kind of musical, for sure.
And thankfully, we only live an hour and a half from New York City, so it's an easy excuse for us. But anything like that, so we would consider any of that more like local travel.
So now that we've kind of defined what we mean by local travel, let's talk about why is it so important?
Yeah, and this is, it's hard to define it without just going into and this is why it matters. But really it matters because of this. And I told Bruce this, and he was like, yeah, you're definitely gonna have to explain that one. So as a kid, I was really into, I'm very weird, but I was really into Dave Ramsey, who's the financial guru guy. And he has this idea of a debt snowball. And that is that you pay off small amounts, because the more you pay off, the more you're gonna see your progress, and it's going to motivate you to keep going. And I almost think of local travel in this same context of the more you say yes to even small, getting out of your comfort zone things like a 3-day weekend or a camping or going to this concert that you wouldn't have considered because it's not in your town. The more you're saying yes to those types of things, the more this idea snowballs. And it gets easier and easier and easier to say yes, to where you get to the point where last year, Bruce and I saw a $400 flight to Portugal, and we're like, sure. We didn't even have a lot of conversation around it, because
Portugal wasn't on our list.
No, and we have all these ideas, and we've said yes so many times that we really only checked a couple of things to make sure it works with our budget and time off, and then we were like, sure, let's go. And that was an amazing trip. And so things like that, I think that the more and more you're saying yes to getting out of your comfort zone and getting out there at all, the easier it is to continue to say yes.
It's travel planning momentum.
Yes, right? Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
That's exactly what it is. And I think when you start small enough, it's like starting any new habit, really.
Yeah.
You're looking at setting a goal that's achievable and something that is reasonable with where you're at. You know, and I think when you listen to our episodes, we're definitely going to talk about a variety of types of travel. And you may be thinking, wow, I don't know if that's for me. I don't know if I'm ready for, big international trips, or thinking about, complex travel hacking. But you definitely can be ready for setting a goal to do a weekend outing.
And of course, thinking about Scotch Cheap Flights, we obviously love that tool. We think it's an amazing tool, and we use it quite a bit. But we traveled locally for so long. We were so ready for new experiences and to get out of our comfort zone, because we had already kind of primed the pump, so to speak, with all this local travel. So even as amazing tool as Scotch Cheap Flights is, it's not going to be helpful if you're not ready to say yes to these new experiences. And local travel can be your key to that.
Definitely. So I think we've covered what do we mean by local travel, our definition, and we've talked about why it's important.
Honestly, I could go on forever and ever.
Yeah, we definitely, and, today's a bit of a soapbox, but I think it's important because we want to encourage everyone to explore. You know, I think what we get out of traveling is so much. You know, it's leisure, it's relaxation, it's exploring, it's opening up your mind to different places, different people and perspectives, which I think you can't put a price on, right?
Right.
And I think it's important to find, so how do we do it, right? And starting with local trips, I think, is a great way to build that up, so you can get to all the other things, and some of the tools that we're offering become more useful, like Scott's Cheap Flights.
Absolutely. So we wanted to give some examples of like what we did as our own local travel in different areas we've lived. So I don't know if we mentioned too much of this, but we've actually lived in four different states. No. Now I'm confused.
Let's count. Ready? You're from Tennessee.
I'm from Tennessee, yeah.
You lived in Massachusetts, technically.
Yeah.
For a little bit.
Okay.
And then Vermont.
Yeah.
Then Florida.
And then Connecticut.
So
me 5.
You 5, me 4.
Yeah. But really, I don't know if we're going to count Massachusetts, because Cape Cod was just for in the summer.
And we lived we lived in the New England region, which you live now. We lived in Florida. And
then I'm going to talk about Memphis a little bit.
In the South.
Just to give you an idea, if you're sitting there going, yeah, but there's nothing cool around me. Like, there almost always is, actually. And actually, we were talking about this morning. The more that you realize that there actually is kind of cool stuff everywhere, also the less nervous you get about that idea of the destination coming to you, because you're like, you know what? I'm probably going to find something cool no matter where we go.
Absolutely. And I wasn't always like that, because my perspective, which is very much a part of where we grew up, you think of, where do you want to go? Well, everyone thinks like Paris, France is a big one. Maybe going to London, England. But you don't think about...
Vigo, Spain?
Yeah, Vigo. Yeah. Right? It was like, okay, like...
But I think that was the best Christmas market we've ever been to.
Right. It was one of the coolest places. And even though there was a bit of a language barrier, the people were so kind and welcoming. And with all the tools that we're going to go over in another episode about language apps and everything and how to deal with that. But with those available to us, it was easy.
Yeah.
And we got to see things that, you may not see marketed in a big way.
But are still amazing. And that is an example, a great example of like, there's cool stuff everywhere. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit, is our kind of what we found in these different regions. So you can get an idea of what you may find in your own region.
All right. So why don't we start with Memphis, where it all started with you?
Yeah, so Memphis is a hard one, actually. I think it's the hardest of all the places we've lived, just because it was landlocked. And it's pretty far from everything, because it's in that part of the country where everything is kind of far away. But even in Memphis, you can go to Nashville. It's only about 3 hours away. Obviously, that's probably people's first thought, is like, well, there's Nashville.
It's a great trip. We went.
It is.
And we did it just in a day.
Yes, and you can do it in just a day. Actually, I think probably most of my trips to Nashville were just day trips. It's about 3 hours. So when you're thinking about how far can I get, Bruce and I would probably consider a weekend trip. The longest we'd go for a 3-day weekend is probably 5.5 hours in a car. We are kind of road trip people, though, so you may want to look around 4.
I would say that would definitely, that's the limit, I would say.
Yeah, and we're road trip people. Like, we like car rides. So I would probably stick around 4-ish for a 3-day weekend. If you're on 4 days, I'd probably maybe go to 5, or if you are people who are up for the challenge of a longer drive. So Nashville is a big one for us for that one. St. Louis can also be a long weekend trip. That's probably closer to that 5 hours, so maybe 4 days. But I definitely went to St. Louis a few times. Clarksville, Mississippi, put our little plug in for them. They have the Blues Trail and all kinds of like amazing live music down there. And it's about a 3-hour drive from Memphis. And Clarksville, Mississippi. Listen, what list is Clarksville, Mississippi on? Do you know what I mean? Like what?
Right. That's what I was
saying
before. Is like when we think about these destinations, Hawaii or going to like Thailand.
Those are amazing. But like you can find some really cool stuff, even though it will not make any top lists.
No headlines.
Right. You can still have an amazing weekend there. So that would be, I think, from Memphis is probably the biggest ones. There's also Chattanooga, also in Tennessee, has the Chattanooga Choo Choo.
There you go.
And also the aquarium there. And Tuscaloosa for an Alabama game. I mean, there's actually, once you start to look, what is 4 hours for me, even in a place with like Memphis, which is very spread out, you can find quite a few pretty cool destinations. I don't even think I put this in here, but Hot Springs, Arkansas,
I was about to say
Ozarks.
go west. Yeah, to the Ozarks.
So, I mean, just some great destinations in every which way, even in what I think is the most difficult of all our locations to plan around.
And I think you also mentioned it's not just all these different places with maybe not big headlines, but you just described a variety of activities.
Absolutely.
Right?
You got
I mean,
the live music in Clarksville. You have the Ozarks, camping, hiking. Hot Springs is a little more of like a spa vibe. Then you have St. Louis, obviously a big city. Nashville, a big city. So you have like every type of trip you can take within a 4-hour radius, 4-ish hour radius of Memphis.
And we're going to call all of that travel.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's experience for, a variety of different things. So whatever you might be into. So that's just Memphis. And I think one of my favorite trips was going to Nashville from Memphis because we spent a lot of time when we were there. But now I'm just going through my head thinking, what are some of my other favorite like weekend or day trips we've done?
Well, let's talk about Florida.
That's what I was about to say. I was like, we're down south anyway. We might as well talk about Florida.
Well, we should clarify. When we say Florida, they joked about where we lived in Florida. It was actually Lower Alabama. It was Panama City, Florida. So you probably only know about it if you are from the South and you vacation in Panama City Beach, or Destin, Florida is right there too. It's the panhandle of Florida. So that's a very, very popular vacation spot for like Southerners.
And for the beaches.
Yeah,
sure.
but not really we've learned, not really for New Englanders. They go further down, like Sarasota, since you're flying anyways.
Right. If you're going to Florida, you're probably going to a different spot.
Yeah, but we lived in the Panhandle, which actually is a good 5.5 hours from Disney. So if you're trying to get like idea of how far that is, it's like 8-9 hours to Miami. Like,
yeah,
Florida's big.
Florida is big for sure. And I know some listeners might be from big states going, yeah, duh. Like,
yeah, right.
But when you live in New England, everything seems.
I mean, in 9 hours from
together.
New England, I can get to the tip of Maine, like from Connecticut.
Yes, for sure.
So that's
maybe
what I mean.
Actually, shorter maybe.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
From
though.
9
it's
hours,
like,
we can
it's
get to the bottom
so
of
far.
Virginia.
Yeah,
right.
that's what we can get through so many different states from New England. But in 9 hours, you're still in Tennessee or you're still in Florida.
And this makes me think of our road trip episode, because really we're looking at travel by car. But there's so much. You start looking around, you just look at your map and where you can explore. There's so much you can do.
And you'll get so good at geography. I'm always like the first one that's like, oh, it's not that far. It's this or this. And they're like, how do you know? And I'm like, I've planned a lot of road trips.
Right.
But anyways, from Florida, maybe some of my favorite trips. I don't know. I mean, obviously, so we had Disney pass holders at this point. So we did a lot of trips to Disney. And that's when I was saying, like, we're road trip people. So 5.5 hours for a long weekend for us is doable. And we did almost once a month go to Disney on our annual pass holders for 3-day weekends.
Hey, it's a great time to listen to a podcast.
Yes, it is. And we got into them for sure. But then there's more. And this is when we were making maybe the least amount of money that we made in our entire relationship because we were just living on my income. And I was a teacher in Florida, which are wildly underpaid. So, I mean, I think we were working with like $35,000, not even $40,000 a year between the two of us.
Right.
So, I mean, we were not making a lot of money and we were still able to do a lot of this local travel. We were not able to do any kind of international travel, no cruises, none of the like bigger trips that we're able to do now. But we still we traveled once a month living in Florida still between the Disney trips and then our maybe favorite ever weekend destination, which is New Orleans.
Yes. Dude, New Orleans, man.
It's one of our favorite cities, I think.
I'm so glad we went there. I don't think I ever thought about it as a place. And if we didn't do these local trips before we got to Florida, I don't think we would have left, really, to explore.
That's 100% true because, honestly, I feel like the only reason we even went to New Orleans was because we felt a little bit like, ooh, we haven't gone anywhere in a while. Like, let's get out and do something.
We had momentum. We had done traveling so much. But yeah, I mean, just to talk a little bit about New Orleans.
It literally has become one of our favorite cities in the country.
Yes, it's so awesome. It's not that expensive.
No, it's actually maybe one of the cheapest big cities you could do, just because it's a southern city and they are typically cheaper, but it's not even like Nashville is a southern big city, but like it's become so commercialized at this point with like bachelorette parties essentially that it's starting to become very expensive. And I feel like New Orleans hasn't really fallen victim to that. There are definitely parties in New Orleans. Like, it's a party city.
Oh, for sure.
But it just has so much, like, culture ingrained in it. And
there's such a vibe there of the people there with a spirit that's awesome. And the music, I mean, you can't get better, like, live music.
Yeah.
It's hard to beat.
We're obviously music people.
Jazz and blues, and rock, everything.
Yeah. And we just, I mean, we eat it up. We love seeing the live music.
The food's amazing, too.
The food is, like, I mean, I dream about it. I can't get anything close to it.
There's nothing like, you know, that
charbroiled
Cajun
oysters.
Creole. Yeah, charbroiled oysters, man. If you're saying seafood, man, I gotta say.
No, I'm not even an oyster person.
Yeah, you gotta just try it. But
yeah.
New Orleans is fun. It's awesome, and it's a party. There's music, but there's so much culture, and it wasn't expensive, so it was a great place to discover. That was only 5 hours from Panama City,
something like that. Yeah.
And
we stayed in Airbnbs, which at the time was the most economical.
Right.
I'm not sure if it would be now, just because the nature of Airbnb has changed a bit since we've been in Florida. So, you know, Airbnb is definitely the most economical, besides the fact that the city itself wasn't that expensive for things like food and drinks. And then there's also the idea that the live music that we love and adore either was completely free, that there was no cover ever, or there was a cover only after a certain time of night, which you never find in some big cities. There's like always a cover if there's a live band or a DJ. And it's just not the case in New Orleans. And I feel like it's because the city just feels so like welcoming and like it wants you to come enjoy the music and the people and the vibe, that they let you in for free. So it's just, I mean, free entertainment. Can't beat that.
All right, so we shared some of our favorites from the South.
Yeah.
Let's talk about New England, the Northeast.
Where we live now. And honestly, the easiest to travel for sure, just because of how close everything is.
Definitely. Well, there's the closeness of different states, but even, you know, airports. It's a pretty dense area. There's a lot around a couple different cities. But like we were saying before, it doesn't matter where you are. You know, you could explore. There's something to be found everywhere. I said different towns, you know, different restaurants, different events.
There has to be. There's only a couple of places in the whole country that we haven't really explored much. So I guess we can't speak for literally every nook and cranny of the country. But beyond like that one stretch of Montana that was pretty long.
Yeah, and like maybe parts of Wyoming, which are pretty broad expanses.
They're pretty, long.
With natural beauty, though. I mean,
yes, I'm sure you could find some amazing hikes and hot springs and like all kinds of things like that. But maybe a little harder to travel. But besides that, I mean, we've explored. We're on state number 42. So we've done most of the United States, and I can say with a good amount of conviction that you can find something everywhere.
Yeah, there's definitely things to explore. And I mean, New England, we've had a lot, like some of my favorite trips we took, especially when, you know, we were just together living in Vermont. I mean, we went to...
Well, yeah. Vermont's beautiful.
Vermont's beautiful itself, so definitely try to go visit there. But we took a weekend to Quebec City.
Yep.
To Montreal, and all those were not too far of a drive.
And those are all like our $10 an hour job trips.
Right, and I think we definitely leaned more towards looking at like hostel level prices for hotels, which was totally
amazing.
Doable.
Yeah,
totally doable. Finding like budget type stays.
We did a trip to Portland, which again, one of my favorite cities up in the like New England area is Portland, Maine. It's just a cool vibe, definitely different than New Orleans vibe, but it's got a lot of like cute kind of storefronts and really nice food. You're on the water because it's like the bay.
And we also had a couple trips to go to Maine. You know, this is another reason to travel as well. We had a friend going to Bates that had a show. So that was, you know, what a great way to go explore and travel is to see people.
Actually, that friend has taken us to many different places to go see his shows. We've gone to Providence, Rhode Island quite a few times to see those shows. And Providence, Rhode Island, that's another like just mind-blowing, like I had no idea what to expect in Rhode Island's like the smallest state, right?
Yep. And
I just thought, well, there's got to be nothing there. Like there's nothing. And it's the big city, I guess, quote unquote, big city. But I love Providence. I think it's a cool city. It's got a lot of cool food.
Oh, the seafood's great.
The seafood obviously is great.
Shout out to clam cakes.
Yeah, but, you know, they just have, again, a very cool vibe. It's got a lot of like...
the art scene is...
Yeah, I was going to say the arts. The arts are big.
Brown.
Yep.
College is there, and
they have a lot. The Trinity Rep is
Trinity.
a really nice. I mean, again, we're theater people, so we look for the theater. But we would never have known, except for that we were going to visit a friend to go see his show, and then we ended up going. I mean, at least 4 times, right? 4 or 5 times to go see different shows that he was in. So that can be a great reason to go. Is finally go see the friend that you know that moved away and you've been talking about forever. Go see them in a show or go see your friend's band. Any of those kind of things can be really great reasons to kind of get out there.
So we hope some of our past experiences inspire you to think of where you can go around, in your region and explore.
Hopefully right after this episode, you get where you're going and you open up Google Maps and
Yes.
you say, what's 4 hours from me right now? What looks cool?
And speaking of Google Maps, or maybe you're not really sure in exploring, one thing I think is really cool, especially if you're looking for a tip on how to maybe make it a little cheaper. If you're just getting to travel hacking and you want to check out like Capital One, that's probably my favorite card provider. I know we have the Venture X, but I believe if you get a couple versions of their card, they all have options for points. You could spend points on events.
Yeah,
so
it's through the portal. So if you go to the Capital One portal, you can see those options of like, when we say events, we mean like Broadway shows, concerts, sporting events.
Yeah, and it's very specific to your region. So it could be a number of like ticket entry fees to festivals, events, shows, like Shelley said. And it's a nice way, one thing I'll say is typically I've seen the points for these, if we're doing 1 cent per point, which we've talked about before, like the redemption.
Yeah, just to give you a visual, if you're like driving going, what? That's 10,000 points would be $100.
Yep. So typically when I've looked at this kind of thing, Shelley and I recently were in New York and we were wondering, I was like, you want to go see another show? Maybe we can buy it with points. So it's not really in our budget, we're going to do that. And let's say the Broadway ticket was $125. Well, it was going to be, the equivalent of $135 in points.
Yeah.
So the redemption isn't great.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you're sitting on a credit card and you're not doing any traveling and you're like, man, I really want to go do these things, but I'm not trying to budget a lot to go pay for this baseball game or this show, check out your credit card and see if you can get things for free.
Yeah.
And if it's worth it to you, because you haven't really used it, I definitely recommend it.
Yeah. The way I would do it, because we were talking about this in the car and he was wondering, should I even say this? And I was like, let me at least tell you what I would do. So I get my heart hurts to not spend at least 1 cent per point because I know how much value you can get out of credit card points. So if it were me and I was staying for a 3-day weekend going to say, a Broadway show, for example, I would buy the tickets with cash and I would erase the hotel. That would be the way that I would save it. But if you have, say, more points than you need and you don't really have it in you to do any kind of international trips and you're thinking, I just need to start saying yes to things, and you have enough to cover both.
Yeah.
Do it. Just start using your
Yeah.
points. And also, there's no reason really to hoard points because you never know when devaluations or, things can happen with your points. So if you have them and this is the way you're going to start saying yes, start saying yes.
So I hope some of these experiences and destinations that Shelley and I have done and loved over the years, convince you guys to get out there and start saying yes.
To that local travel.
Yeah,
that's the way.
Travel local, man, and definitely check out, credit card points, see what you can get, see what events are happening. And definitely if you do, send us an email, let us know. So you can email us at
contact@travelmorepodcast.com.
Contact@travelmorepodcast.com. But we'd love to shout out to any of our listeners who share your experiences, any cool things you find.
Getting out there and doing the thing.
Yeah.
Actually doing these things.
Share stories, share pictures, share tips, whatever you find. I think it's really great. So we can bring it up to on one of our future episodes.
Absolutely. And as always, you can find us all over the internet, like at travelmorepodcast.com, on Instagram at the Travelmores, on Reddit at Travelmore, all over the place.
Cool. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
See ya.
Did you know that every time you book a Disney or Universal vacation, you're paying for a service that you may not even be using?
Really?
That's right. Travel agent costs are added to your Disney or Universal vacation, whether you use one or not.
So you're telling me that I'm paying for something even though I'm not getting the help?
You got it. So next time you want to book a theme park vacation, make your money work for you. By booking with Magic Pass Travel, you'll get our expertise and years of experience without paying any extra and while supporting a small business.
Check out our show notes to find our contact information.
Can't wait to help you plan your next adventure.